You took care of me for more than 26 years, and what the millionaire does transforms her life." Dorothy Miller was nervously cleaning the marble floor of the enormous living room when she heard the voices approaching. Her boss had mentioned an important meeting with investors, and she needed to finish quickly before they arrived. Her trembling hands gripped the cloth tightly, trying to ignore the back pain that had followed her for decades. That was when the door opened, and she heard a voice that made her heart race. Among the men in suits who walked in, one of them spoke with a familiar intonation, but she didn't dare look up to confirm her suspicions. "Good morning, Mr. Bernard," said the tallest man, reaching out his hand to the boss. "I'm Christopher Harrison from Harrison Wealth Management. A pleasure to meet you in person." Dorothy felt her legs go weak. That name, that voice. It was impossible. The shy, frightened little boy she had cared for so many years ago couldn't be that elegant man in the expensive suit. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Harrison," Bernard replied, visibly nervous. "Welcome to my home. Shall we head to the office?" "Actually," said Christopher, stopping in the middle of the room and looking directly at Dorothy, "I'd like to have a coffee first. How long has this lady been working here?" Bernard was annoyed by the question. "She's just the cleaning lady. No need to concern yourself with that. Dorothy, leave immediately." "No, please." Christopher raised his hand. "I'd like to speak with her for a moment." Dorothy finally looked up and met the man's penetrating gaze. Her graying hair escaped from her white cap, and her calloused hands trembled visibly. He studied her intensely, as if searching for something familiar in her aged face. "How old are you, Mum?" Christopher asked gently. 72, sir," she replied in a low voice. "And have you been working here long?" Bernard approached, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Harrison, I really don't see the need—" "Only 2 years, sir," Dorothy interrupted quickly. "Before that, I worked in other houses." Christopher took a few steps toward her. "Have you ever cared for children?" Dorothy's heart raced even faster. "Yes, sir. I've been a nanny a few times." "And do you remember any child in particular?" She swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure. "There were many, sir. Over 50 years of work. A child who had terrible nightmares every night," Christopher continued, stepping closer. "A little boy who cried hidden in the bathroom because he was afraid of his father." Dorothy felt tears welling up in her eyes but tried to hide it. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." "A little boy who could only fall asleep when a lady sang that song." Christopher began to hum softly. "Sleep, sleep, my little boy, your mommy is right here." Dorothy's tears began to stream down her face. That song, she hadn't sung it in over 20 years. Bernard was completely lost. "Mr. Harrison, I really don't understand. Do you remember now?" Christopher asked, his eyes welling up. Dorothy shook her head, trying to deny it, but the words came out in a whisper. "Chris, it's me, Mrs. Dorothy," he said, using the affectionate nickname she used to hate when she was young. "It's me." Bernard looked back and forth between them, completely confused. "You two know each other." Christopher approached Dorothy and gently held her calloused hands. "This lady took care of me from ages 6 to 8. She was more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was." "But how?" Bernard stammered. "How did you find her here?" "I didn't find her," said Christopher, without letting go of Dorothy's hands. "I've been looking for her. I've been hiring private detectives to find her for 10 years. I discovered she worked for you for 6 months, and that's why I decided to invest in your company." Dorothy couldn't believe what she was hearing. You looked for me?" "Every day for the last 10 years, Christopher smiled through his tears. "You simply disappeared from my life when I needed you most." "I was fired," she whispered. "Your mother sent me away without an explanation." "I know," said Christopher, "and it took me years to find out why." Bernard cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, what an interesting coincidence. But perhaps we could get back to business." "Actually," said Christopher, finally letting go of Dorothy's hands, "business can wait. Mrs. Dorothy, would you mind making us some coffee? I'd love to talk." "Of course," she said, still in shock. I'll make it right away." As Dorothy made her way to the kitchen on trembling legs, Christopher turned to Bernard. "I hope you treat this woman well. She's a very special person. Of course, said Bernard, trying to please. Dorothy is an exemplary employee. But Christopher had noticed the nervousness in the man's voice and the tension in Dorothy's body. Something wasn't right in that house. In the kitchen, Dorothy leaned against the sink, trying to steady her breathing. How was it possible? The scared, scrawny boy she had rocked to sleep every night had become that imposing, successful man. She had always wondered what had happened to him after she was let go so abruptly. Her hands trembled as she made the coffee. The memories came flooding back. Christopher coming home bruised, hiding the marks under his clothes, the shouting coming from his parents' bedroom in the middle of the night, the constant nightmares that made him wake up crying. Mrs. Dorothy. Christopher's voice startled her. He had walked into the kitchen without making a sound. I'm sorry, sir. The coffee is almost ready. You don't have to call me sir, he said, stepping closer. I'm still that little boy you used to comfort during the storms. Dorothy felt a lump in her throat. You've grown so much, and you look so different. On the outside, maybe, Christopher smiled sadly. But on the inside, I'm still that scared little boy who could only fall asleep in your lap. She finally looked him in the eyes, truly. There he was. His brown eyes still held the same deep sadness from decades ago, but now there was also something new, determination. What happened after I left? She asked softly. Christopher sighed. A lot. My mother sent me to boarding school when I was 9. Said I was too spoiled. Boarding school? Dorothy pressed her hand to her chest. But you were so little. It was hard at first, he admitted, but maybe it was for the best. There I learned to defend myself, to study, to dream of a different future. And your parents? Christopher was silent for a moment. My father kept running the business until he ran it into the ground when I was 15. My mother, well, she never got past the problems she already had when you worked there. Dorothy felt her heart tighten. And how did you become a successful businessman? He finished. A lot of studying, a lot of hard work, and a determination I learned by watching you. Remember how you never gave up on me, even when I threw tantrums or woke up crying for the 10th time in the same night? Tears welled up in Dorothy's eyes again. You were a child. You needed care. Exactly, said Christopher. And that's what taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, an opportunity to grow. That's how I built my company. The sound of footsteps in the living room alerted them that Bernard was approaching. The coffee is taking a while, Bernard said from the kitchen doorway with an impatient tone. It's ready, said Dorothy quickly, picking up the tray. Let me take that, said Christopher, taking the tray from her hands. Bernard watched the interaction with a strange expression. You two really know each other well, don't you? Very well, Christopher confirmed. Mrs. Dorothy was the most important person in my childhood. When they returned to the living room, Christopher placed the tray on the coffee table carefully. Bernard, I'd like to make a different proposal today. Different how? Instead of me investing in your company, how about I buy it outright? Bernard almost dropped his coffee cup. Buy it? But that wasn't in our plans. Plans change, said Christopher calmly. And I have a specific condition for the purchase. What condition? Christopher looked at Dorothy, who was standing by the door, clearly uncomfortable. I want you to sit with us, Mrs. Dorothy. But she's just... Bernard began. She isn't just anything, Christopher interrupted firmly. Please sit down. Dorothy approached hesitantly and sat on the edge of an armchair, her hands in her lap. My condition is simple, Christopher continued. I want to hire Mrs. Dorothy as general supervisor of all the properties my company manages. Bernard was stunned. Supervisor? But she doesn't have the credentials to... She has 50 years of experience taking care of homes and families, said Christopher. That's worth more than any degree. Dorothy shook her head vigorously. No, I can't accept that. That would be charity. Charity? Christopher turned to her. Mrs. Dorothy, do you think it's charity when someone recognizes a person's worth? But I'm just a maid. You've been a nanny, cook, housekeeper, nurse, psychologist, and surrogate mother to dozens of families over 5 decades, said Christopher with a firm voice. That doesn't make you just anything. That makes you an expert in caring for people and managing homes. Bernard was clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Mr. Harrison, Perhaps we could discuss this in private." "There's nothing to discuss in private." Christopher stood up. "Mrs. Dorothy, do you accept my proposal?" She looked at Bernard, who wore a disapproving expression, then at Christopher. "I need to think." "Of course," said Christopher gently. "Take all the time you need. I'll be in New York City for a few days. Can I come back tomorrow for your answer?" Dorothy nodded timidly. "Great," Christopher addressed Bernard. "As for the company purchase, I'll need to review some documents. Can we meet tomorrow as well?" Bernard, still processing everything that had happened, just nodded. After Christopher left, Bernard turned to Dorothy with anger in his eyes. "What exactly happened between you two when you worked for his family?" "Nothing much," she said, starting to gather the cups. "I took care of him when he was a child." "You must have taken care of him very well for him to want to give you a position like that," said Bernard sarcastically. "I hope you're not thinking of accepting this madness." Dorothy stopped gathering the cups. "Why would it be madness? Because you're not capable of a position like that," Bernard exploded. "You can barely read." His words hit her like a slap. It was true that she had only studied through the 4th grade, but that didn't mean she was incapable. "I know how to read," she said softly. "Knowing how to read isn't the same as having the credentials to supervise anything," Bernard continued cruelly. "You'll make a fool of yourself and he'll fire you within a week. Better to stay in your place." Dorothy finished gathering the cups in silence and headed to the kitchen. Bernard's words echoed in her mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe she really wasn't capable of a supervisor position. That night, alone in her small room at the back of the house, Dorothy lay awake thinking. Christopher was right when he said she had taken care of dozens of families. In every house, she had learned something new. Organization, household management, dealing with different types of personalities, resolving conflicts among staff. But was that enough for a real position? She had never worked in an office, never used a computer, never attended important meetings. On the other hand, the memory of little Christopher crying in her lap made her feel something she hadn't felt in years, that her life had had meaning, that she had made a difference in someone's life. The next morning, Dorothy woke up before sunrise, as always. She made the coffee, swept the front entrance, and was watering the garden when she saw Christopher arriving. "Good morning, Mrs. Dorothy," he smiled. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," she admitted. "I was thinking about your offer. And did you come to any conclusion?" Dorothy took a deep breath. "I don't know if I'm capable of what you're offering." Christopher approached and sat on the stone bench in the garden. "Come sit here with me." She hesitated but sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "Mrs. Dorothy, let me tell you a story," said Christopher. "When I was 7 years old, my mother hired a new nanny, a young woman with a degree in education, with several recommendations." Dorothy listened to him in silence. That woman knew everything about child development, educational techniques, balanced nutrition, Christopher continued. But she didn't know the one thing a traumatized child needs: genuine affection. "Every child is different." "Exactly," said Christopher. "And you always knew that instinctively. Do you remember when I had pneumonia, and the doctor said I needed to take a horrible medicine 4 times a day?" Dorothy smiled slightly. "You refused to take it. And you came up with that little airplane game. But not just any airplane. You noticed I liked military planes and made up stories about how the medicine was special fuel for me to become a brave pilot. You took the medicine properly after that. Because you understood that I didn't just need medicine. I needed hope," said Christopher, moved. "That's not something you learn in any college, Mrs. Dorothy. That comes from the heart." Dorothy felt her eyes well up again. "Now let me ask you something," Christopher continued. "In all the houses where you worked, did your employers only look for you for cleaning?" "No," she admitted. "I usually ended up taking care of everything, organizing the pantry, supervising the other employees, solving problems, because they trusted your experience and good judgment," said Christopher. "Mrs. Dorothy, supervising is exactly that, using experience and good judgment to take care of things and people." At that moment, Bernard appeared at the door of the house. "Mr. Harrison, can we talk?" Christopher stood up. "Of course. Mrs. Dorothy, think about what we discussed." As the two men went inside the house, Dorothy stayed in the garden, thinking about Christopher's words. Was he right? Did all that experience really have value? She thought of all the situations she had handled over the years. Employees fighting in the kitchen, sick children in the middle of the night, household emergencies when her employers were traveling. It had always been her making the decisions, finding the solutions, keeping everything running. Maybe Christopher was right. Maybe she knew more about supervising than she imagined. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Inside the house, the conversation between Christopher and Bernard was tense. Listen, Mr. Harrison, Bernard was saying, I don't know what kind of relationship you've had with my employee, but I need to make it clear that she's nothing more than a simple maid. Christopher stared back at him coldly. What kind of relationship? What exactly are you implying? Nothing much, Bernard backed down. I just find all this interest in a cleaning lady strange. My interest is personal and family related, said Christopher dryly, and it's irrelevant to our business. The question is, do you want to sell the company or not? Of course I do, said Bernard quickly, but this business of hiring her, it's non-negotiable, Christopher interrupted. Either you accept my conditions, or I'll look for another investment. Bernard was silent for a moment. The company was in serious financial trouble, and that sale was his only chance to save himself from bankruptcy. Fine, he gave in, but she'll need training. Obviously, agreed Christopher. I'll arrange all the necessary training. And if she doesn't adapt, that'll be my problem, not yours, said Christopher firmly. After they settled the details of the purchase, Christopher returned to the garden where Dorothy was still sitting, lost in thought. May I ask what your decision was? He asked gently. Dorothy took a deep breath. I accept your offer, but with one condition. Christopher smiled. Which is, I want to start slowly, as an assistant to someone experienced, to learn how things work in an office. Perfect, agreed Christopher. In fact, I have the ideal person to be your mentor. Her name is Martha Sullivan. She's 65 years old, and she started as a secretary 40 years ago. Today, she's one of my most competent directors. She won't mind teaching a woman like me. Martha will love it, Christopher assured her. She always says life experience is worth more than a degree. You two will get along great. That afternoon, Christopher took Dorothy to see the company's office. It was a modern building in downtown New York City, with elevators, air conditioning, and many elegantly dressed people moving through the hallways. Dorothy felt completely out of place in her simple clothes, but Christopher treated her with such respect that the people around began to treat her the same way. Martha, said Christopher, walking into a spacious office where a woman with grey hair was working at her computer. I want to introduce our new supervisor, Dorothy Miller. Martha stood up with a warm smile. She was an elegant woman, but with an approachable manner that put Dorothy at ease immediately. Nice to meet you, Dorothy, said Martha, extending her hand. Christopher told me about your experience. 50 years taking care of homes and families. What an impressive resume. Dorothy blushed. You're very kind, but I don't know anything about working in an office there. And I don't know anything about running a household with 15 staff members and 5 children, laughed Martha. We each have our specialty. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from each other. Christopher watched the interaction with satisfaction. He had chosen well in assigning Martha as her mentor. Martha will explain how our company works, said Christopher. We manage residential properties for high-income families. Your role will be to supervise the work of the household teams. It's like being a housekeeper for several homes at once, explained Martha, except instead of living in one house, you visit them all and make sure everything is running perfectly. Dorothy began to understand better. It's like coordinating several maids at the same time. Exactly, said Martha. And who better than someone who's been a maid herself to understand the challenges and needs of each one? During the rest of the afternoon, Martha showed Dorothy how the system worked. Tracking spreadsheets, visit reports, cleaning schedules, supply inventories. It was a lot of information, but Dorothy realized the core of it was the same thing she had been doing for decades, just in a more organized way. The most important thing, Martha explained, is to treat each employee with respect and understand that every household has its own particularities. Some families are stricter about cleanliness, others about punctuality, others about discretion. Like each family being a different boss, said Dorothy, understanding perfectly. Exactly, Martha smiled. You're going to do very well in this job. When they left the office, Christopher asked, "What did you think?" "Intimidating," Dorothy admitted, "but also interesting. It's different from anything I've ever done, but at the same time it feels familiar." "Would you like me to take you home?" Christopher offered. "That's not necessary," she said quickly. "I can take the bus." "Mrs. Dorothy," Christopher said gently, "accepting help isn't being weak, it's being smart." She hesitated, then nodded. During the ride in Christopher's luxury car, Dorothy watched through the window the familiar streets of the city where she had worked her entire life. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Of course. Why did you really look for me? After so many years, you have a good, successful life. Why care about an old housekeeper?" Christopher stopped the car at a red light and turned to her. "Mrs. Dorothy, you saved me." "What do you mean?" "When I was a child, I thought I was good for nothing. My parents fought all the time. My father treated me like I was a burden. My mother was always sedated. I truly believed I was to blame for everything that was wrong in that house." Dorothy felt her heart tighten. "Chris, until you came along," he continued. "You were the first person who treated me like I had value, who listened when I talked, who cared about my feelings, who made me feel like I deserved to be loved." Tears streamed down Dorothy's face. "You were a precious child. Anyone who spent time with you would have seen that. But it was you who spent time with me," said Christopher. "It was you who taught me that I was capable of good things. Every day when I wake up, I remember your words. You're special, Chris. You're going to grow up and do important things." That's what gave me the strength to study, to work, to build this company. The light turned green, but Christopher didn't move. Other cars started honking, but he didn't care. "Mrs. Dorothy, I looked for you because I wanted the chance to repay what you did for me, not out of obligation, but out of love. Because you taught me what real love is." Dorothy sobbed quietly. "I only did what any decent person would do." "That's not true," Christopher said firmly. "You did what a mother would do, and you were more of a mother to me in 2 years than my own mother was in my entire life." Finally, Christopher started driving again, and they continued in respectful silence until they reached Bernard's house. "Tomorrow, you start a new life," Christopher said as they pulled up. "Are you ready?" "I'm very scared," she admitted. "Fear is normal," he said. "But remember, you've already proven to yourself that you're capable of taking care of everything and everyone. Now you'll have the opportunity to show that to the world." That night, Dorothy could barely sleep. For the first time in decades, it wasn't exhaustion or body aches keeping her awake, but anticipation, a mix of fear and excitement she hadn't felt since her youth. The next morning, she woke up even earlier than usual, took a careful shower, and put on her best dress, a simple style, but clean and well-pressed, which she had bought years ago for a niece's wedding. Bernard watched her during breakfast with an expression between contempt and envy. "So you're really going to try this craziness?" he said. "Yes, I am," Dorothy replied, with more firmness in her voice than he expected. "When you come back with your tail between your legs, don't expect me to take you back." Dorothy looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm not coming back, Bernard, and even if I did, it wouldn't be to work for you." It was the first time in 2 years that she had called him by his first name, without the Mr. in front. Bernard was surprised by the change in attitude. "You've always been arrogant," he snarled. "I've never been arrogant," Dorothy said calmly. "I just never knew my worth. Now I'm learning." Christopher arrived promptly at 8 in the morning to pick her up. Dorothy was already waiting at the door with a small, simple bag containing her few personal belongings. "Ready for your first day?" he asked, smiling. "As ready as I can be," she replied, taking a deep breath. At the office, Martha welcomed her with hot coffee and a detailed schedule of the day's activities. "Today, we're going to visit 3 properties," Martha explained. "A family home with 4 staff members, a bachelor's apartment with 2 daily cleaners, and a weekend country house with a team of 5 people. And what exactly do I have to do?" "Observe, ask, take notes, and learn," Martha smiled. "For now, you're my extra eyes and ears." The first house was an elegant townhouse in the Upper East Side of the city. The household staff consisted of a cook, 2 cleaners, and an ironer. Dorothy watched as Martha talked with each one, checked the work, jotted down observations, and resolved small conflicts. "Mrs. Mary is complaining that Brenda isn't cleaning the bathrooms properly," one of the cleaners whispered to Martha. Instead of taking sides immediately, Martha asked to see the bathroom in question. Then she spoke separately with the 2 employees. "Brenda is using an expired cleaning product," Martha explained to Dorothy afterward. "That's why it wasn't removing the soap residue properly. Problem solved by replacing the product, not by arguing with the employee." Dorothy was impressed by the approach. "Do you always investigate before judging?" "Always," Martha confirmed. 90% of problems among employees are caused by misunderstandings or lack of adequate resources. At the second house, a luxury apartment, the situation was different. The owner was present and constantly complained about the work of the daily cleaners. "They can't do anything right," the man complained. "Just yesterday they left an iron mark on a shirt." Martha listened patiently, then asked to see the shirt and the ironing board. She discovered that the iron was defective and burning the clothes. "I'll arrange for a new iron today," Martha said, "and I'll teach the girls how to identify defects in the equipment before using it." After they left the apartment, Dorothy commented, "He was quite rude to them." "Some employers are like that," Martha sighed. "They think that paying a salary gives them the right to treat people badly. Our job is to protect our employees without losing the client." "And how do you do that?" "By being very professional and always being right," Martha smiled. "When you demonstrate competence and solve problems efficiently, even the most difficult clients learn to respect you." The third property was a country house on the outskirts of the city. The team was larger and more complex: a gardener, a caretaker, 2 cleaners, and a cook. There, Dorothy witnessed a more complicated situation. "Mrs. Margaret is threatening to fire everyone because of the disappearance of some jewelry," explained the caretaker, worried. Martha met with the entire team to talk. Instead of making accusations or creating an atmosphere of distrust, she asked about each person's work routine. "Who had access to the lady of the house's bedroom this week?" she asked calmly. Everyone reported their activities. Martha carefully wrote everything down, then asked to speak with the owner of the house. "Mrs. Margaret," said Martha respectfully, "before we take any drastic action, why don't we check whether the jewels weren't put away somewhere else? Sometimes when we put something away in a hurry..." The suggestion was spot on. The jewels were inside a purse Mrs. Margaret had used on a trip and had forgotten in the closet of the guest room. "How did you know?" asked Dorothy as they headed back to the office. "Experience," said Martha. "In 20 years doing this work, I've learned that people accuse employees of theft when they can't find their own things 9 times out of 10. The 10th time it's actual theft, the investigation needs to be much more careful. And if it really was theft, then we'd involve the family, investigate discreetly, and only take action with concrete proof," explained Martha. "You never fire someone based on suspicion. That destroys lives." In that first week, Dorothy accompanied Martha on dozens of visits, witnessed all kinds of situations, and absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Her practical experience helped her understand problems quickly and even suggest solutions. "You have a natural instinct for this work," commented Martha on Friday. "In the situation with the cook who was burning the food, you immediately realized the problem was the stove, not her." "I've seen a lot of misadjusted stoves in my life," smiled Dorothy. "When the flame is too blue, it's a sign there's something wrong with the regulator." "Exactly," said Martha enthusiastically. "That kind of knowledge isn't taught in any course. It comes from practice, from observation, from experience." Christopher made a point of stopping by the office every day to check on how Dorothy was adjusting. She would report the day's experiences, always surprised by her own ability to understand and resolve situations. "I'm proud of you," he said one afternoon. "Martha told me you're learning faster than any trainee who's ever come through here." It's familiar," explained Dorothy. "It's as if I've been doing the same thing all along, just in a more organized way." "Exactly," agreed Christopher. "The only difference is that now you have the recognition and the pay you always deserved." In the second week, Martha began giving Dorothy more autonomy. She started making some visits on her own, always with detailed guidance on what to observe and how to proceed. The first house she visited alone was that of a young family with 3 small children. The only employee was a nanny, who also did housework and was clearly overwhelmed. "I can't handle everything," confessed the nanny, a 30-year-old woman who looked exhausted. "The kids demand constant attention, but the lady of the house wants me to also do heavy cleaning, cooking, ironing. I barely have time to eat lunch." Dorothy immediately recognized the situation. She herself had lived through it dozens of times over her career. "How many hours a day do you work?" she asked. 12 at minimum, sometimes more, if the kids get sick or have some special event. "And your days off?" The nanny laughed bitterly. "Days off? The lady of the house always comes up with some emergency." Dorothy noted everything carefully, then spoke with the lady of the house. "Mrs. Sarah," she said respectfully, "I can see that Jennifer is a very dedicated employee, but she's taking on too many roles for one person." "She's paid for it," said the lady of the house defensively. "Actually," explained Dorothy diplomatically, "nanny and housekeeper are different professions with different responsibilities. When one person does both, neither gets done well." "Are you suggesting I hire someone else?" "I'm suggesting you set priorities," said Dorothy. "If the children are what matters most, Jennifer should be focusing on them. If the priority is keeping the house clean, maybe it's better to hire a housekeeper and a part-time nanny." The conversation went on for an hour, with Dorothy patiently explaining the benefits of having specialized staff who aren't as overloaded. In the end, her employer agreed to hire a daily cleaner for the heavy cleaning work. "How did you manage to convince her?" Martha asked when Dorothy told her about it. "I spoke her language," Dorothy explained. "I showed her that in the end, she'd get better quality service while spending almost the same amount of money, just distributing it differently." "Brilliant," Martha smiled. "You're starting to think like an executive." After a month in her new job, Dorothy felt completely transformed, not just because of the much better salary she was earning, but because of her renewed self-esteem. She had discovered that she possessed valuable skills and that her experience was truly a differentiator. Her visits to the properties became something the staff looked forward to, seeing her as someone who truly understood their struggles and fought for better working conditions. "You're different," one of the housekeepers commented. "When you talk to the bosses, they listen, and you always stand up for us." "I know what it's like to work in this position," Dorothy replied. "And I know that an employee who's treated well works better." Christopher watched this evolution with growing satisfaction. Seeing Dorothy flourish professionally was one of the greatest joys of his life. "I have a proposal for you," he said one afternoon. "How would you like to take over coordinating all the residences on the Upper East Side? It would be your first team." Dorothy was silent for a moment. "Does that mean—" "It means you'd have 15 properties under your responsibility, with about 40 employees," Christopher explained. "Martha would remain your direct supervisor, but the day-to-day decisions would be yours. I don't know if I'm ready." "Mrs. Dorothy," Christopher said gently, "you're more ready than you think, and you're not alone. The whole team is here to support you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Dorothy's promotion sparked some comments at the office. A few younger employees questioned whether she really had the experience to take on such a big responsibility. "She doesn't even have a college degree," one of the junior supervisors commented. "How can she be above me in the hierarchy?" Martha, who heard the comment, called a general meeting. "I want to make one thing very clear," she said to the whole team. In this company, what matters is competence and results, not a diploma. Dorothy has 50 years of practical experience in the field. How many of you can say the same? But that experience is as a domestic employee, another employee muttered. Exactly, Martha said firmly. Experience from someone who knows the work from the inside, who understands the real difficulties, who knows exactly what works and what doesn't. That's much more valuable than book theory. Christopher, who had heard about the comments, made a point of attending the meeting. Let me tell you all something, he said to the team. This company exists because I believe that life experience is worth more than a diploma. Dorothy wasn't hired as a personal favor. She was hired because she's the most qualified person I know for this specific job. But sir, the junior supervisor insisted, wouldn't someone with an academic background be more appropriate? Christopher stared at him. You have an MBA in business administration, don't you, Jason? Yes, sir. Great. Then tell me, how would you handle the situation of a cook who keeps burning the food, but has 15 years with the household and is very loved by the family? Jason hesitated. Well, I would investigate the causes of the problem. What causes? Be specific. Maybe lack of attention, stress, personal problems? Dorothy, said Christopher, turning to her, how did you resolve that case last week? First, I tested the stove, Dorothy replied calmly. The gas regulator was misadjusted, making the flame too high. Second, I checked whether she was seeing well, because older people sometimes develop vision problems and don't notice. Third, I talked to her about recipes, because I found out the family had changed their diet and she was trying to adapt dishes she'd known for years. Christopher turned back to Jason. Would you think to test the stove? Jason lowered his head, embarrassed. Probably not. Exactly, said Christopher. A degree teaches theory, experience teaches reality. And to manage households, we need people who understand reality. After the meeting, some employees approached Dorothy to apologize for their comments. You don't need to apologize, she said gently. I understand the strangeness. It's strange for me to be here too, but I hope to prove that I deserve the trust you're placing in me. Her new position brought even greater challenges. Coordinating 15 properties means dealing with dozens of different personalities, both among the staff and the employers. Her first major crisis happened when 3 employees from one of the houses threatened to quit on the same day, claiming the lady of the house was being abusive. She yells at us over anything, one of them reported. Yesterday I was in tears because she humiliated me in front of the guests. Dorothy knew that losing 3 experienced employees at once would be a disaster for both the family and the company. But she also knew that mistreated employees don't perform well at work. She scheduled a meeting with the lady of the house, a young, well-educated woman, but visibly stressed. Mrs. Cynthia, Dorothy said respectfully, I need to talk to you about your household staff. They complained about me, didn't they? Cynthia said defensively. I pay well, I give all the benefits. I don't understand why they don't do their job right. May I ask what exactly is not meeting your expectations? Cynthia began listing a series of complaints. Poorly washed dishes, badly ironed clothes, dusty furniture. Dorothy listened to everything patiently. And how do you communicate these concerns to them? I clearly tell them what's wrong, Cynthia said. I can't waste time explaining the obvious. I understand, Dorothy said diplomatically. Mrs. Cynthia, may I make a suggestion? During the conversation that followed, Dorothy skillfully showed Cynthia how the way you communicate is just as important as the content. She explained that employees who are publicly humiliated get nervous and make more mistakes, creating a vicious cycle. Have you ever worked for someone? Dorothy asked. Of course, I worked at companies before I got married. And how did you feel when your boss criticized you in front of other colleagues? Cynthia became thoughtful. Terrible. I even thought about quitting sometimes. Exactly, Dorothy said softly. Your employees are people like anyone else. They have feelings, pride, dignity. When they're respected, they give their best. The conversation lasted 2 hours, but in the end, Cynthia agreed to change her approach. Dorothy also spoke separately with the employees, explaining the pressures the lady of the house was facing in her personal life. She lost her father last month, Dorothy explained, and she's pregnant with her first child. Sometimes people take out their stress in inappropriate ways, but that doesn't mean they don't like you. The result was surprising. Within 2 weeks, the situation had completely stabilized. Patricia learned to give feedback constructively, and the employees, understanding the context better, became more patient with their boss's difficult moments. "How did you manage to resolve a situation that seemed impossible?" asked Martha, impressed. "I treated everyone like people," answered Dorothy simply. "A stressed-out boss is just a stressed-out person. A hurt employee is just a hurt person. When you get people to see each other as human beings instead of adversaries, they find a way to understand each other." Cases like this became Dorothy's trademark. Her ability to mediate conflicts and find human solutions to practical problems caught the attention of the whole company. Christopher watched her progress with growing pride, but also with a hint of concern. He knew Dorothy was pushing herself beyond her limits to prove her worth. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said one afternoon, finding her in the office late, organizing reports. "You don't need to work 12 hours a day. No one is asking that of you." "I know," she replied, "but I like what I'm doing. For the first time in my life, I feel like my work has a real impact." "It always did," said Christopher. "The difference is that now you're being recognized for it." Dorothy stopped what she was doing and looked at him. "Chris, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you have a family, children?" Christopher was silent for a moment. "No. I never got married." "Why?" "Good question." He smiled sadly. "Maybe because I never found someone who made me feel as safe as you made me feel when I was a child." Dorothy felt her heart tighten. "That's not healthy, my boy. You need to build a family of your own." "I did build a family," said Christopher. "A company where I take care of hundreds of employees, a place where people like you can grow and thrive. To me, that's family. But it's not the same as having a wife, children." "Maybe not," Christopher agreed, "but it's what makes sense for me right now." That conversation made Dorothy think about the sacrifices Christopher had made in his personal life. He had dedicated himself so fully to building his business empire that he had forgotten to build personal relationships. "Do you go to church?" she asked suddenly. Christopher laughed. "It's been a while. Why?" "Sunday there's mass at the church in my neighborhood. Afterward, a few of the ladies get together to have lunch. Why don't you come with me?" "Mrs. Dorothy, I don't want to be a bother." "You wouldn't be a bother," she said firmly. "You'd be my special guest. And who knows, maybe you'll meet a nice young woman with good values there." Christopher smiled, touched by the maternal care Dorothy still showed him. "All right, I'll go." Sunday arrived, and Christopher showed up at the door of the small house Dorothy had rented near her work. It was a simple little house, but clean and well kept, with a front garden where she grew herbs and a few flowers. "What a cozy home," Christopher remarked, stepping into the modestly furnished living room. "It's small, but it's mine," said Dorothy with pride. "First time in my life I have a place that's all my own." The church was small and attended mostly by ordinary folks from the neighborhood. Christopher stood out a bit with his elegant clothes, but Dorothy introduced him to everyone as my boy who grew into a successful man. During Mass, he watched how she interacted with the other people. She was well liked and respected, treated everyone with genuine warmth, and several people came up to greet her and ask about her new job. "Mrs. Dorothy is different," commented an elderly woman. "Happier, more confident. The new job has been good for her." After Mass, the group headed to one of the ladies' homes for the community lunch. There were about 15 people, mostly women over 60, some with their children and grandchildren. Christopher found himself surrounded by attention. The ladies asked questions about his business, told stories about their own lives, and some of the younger ones in their 40s clearly showed romantic interest. "My son works at an accounting firm," said one of the women. "Maybe you two could talk business." "My daughter is a teacher, single, a very accomplished young woman," hinted another. Christopher was polite with all of them, but Dorothy could tell he was uncomfortable with the matchmaking attempts. "Leave the boy alone," she interjected with good humor. "He'll find someone when the time is right." Later, walking back home, Christopher thanked her. "Thank you for defending me from the matchmakers." Dorothy laughed. "They mean well, and some of those daughters and granddaughters are very nice young women." "I'm sure," said Christopher, "but I'm not looking for a wife at a church gathering." Where are you looking? Christopher grew thoughtful. Honestly, I'm not looking. I'm so focused on work that I don't even think about it. That's not right, said Dorothy maternally. Work is important, but it can't be the only thing in life. You need someone to share your joys and sorrows with. I have you for that, he said sincerely. I'm like a mother to you, said Dorothy. But a mother can't replace a wife. They're different kinds of love, but both are important. That conversation planted a seed in Christopher's mind. For the first time in years, he began to think seriously about his personal life. Meanwhile, at work, Dorothy continued to impress with her growing competence. Her department became the most efficient in the company, with the lowest employee turnover rates and the best client reviews. You have a natural gift for leadership, commented Martha. Your employees respect you in a way I rarely see. They respect me because I respect them, said Dorothy, and because they know I've been in their shoes. When you've been an employee yourself, you understand the real difficulties of the job. Her reputation was spreading throughout the company, and offers began to come in for her to take on even greater responsibilities. How about coordinating the entire metropolitan area? Suggested Christopher during one of their weekly conversations. That would be more than 50 properties. Dorothy hesitated. Wouldn't that be too big for me? Mrs. Dorothy, you've already proven you're capable of far more than you ever imagined, and I would be here to support you in everything. But what if I can't handle it? What if I disappoint you? Christopher looked at her warmly. You've never disappointed me. And even if it didn't work out, it wouldn't change anything between us. You've already given me far more than I could ever ask for. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and her own office in the building. Dorothy could hardly believe the transformation in her life. Sometimes I wake up thinking it's all a dream, she confessed to Martha. It's real, smiled Martha, and it's deserved. You worked 50 years to get here. It was time you were recognized. With her new position, Dorothy began attending board meetings, giving her opinion on company policies, and even interviewing candidates for supervisory roles. During one of those interviews, she came across a familiar situation. A middle-aged woman, a former domestic worker, seeking an opportunity to grow professionally. Why do you want to work at a company like this? Asked Dorothy. Because I worked 30 years as a domestic, and I know I have the knowledge to contribute, answered the candidate. I just never had the chance to show it. Dorothy saw herself in that woman. And what does your family think about this change? Meus filhos acham que estou ficando louca, riu a mulher nervosamente. Dizem que na minha idade deveria me contentar com o que tenho. E o que a senhora acha? Acho que nunca é tarde para crescer, disse a mulher com determinação. Doralice a contratou no mesmo dia e não se arrependeu. Em poucos meses, a nova funcionária se tornou uma das supervisoras mais eficientes da empresa. Você está criando uma revolução silenciosa, comentou Ricardo, contratando pessoas que outras empresas nem considerariam. Estou dando chances que eu gostaria de ter tido mais cedo, explicou Doralice. Imagina quantas mulheres competentes estão perdidas em trabalhos que não aproveitam seu potencial, simplesmente porque ninguém aposta nelas. A filosofia de Doralice começou a influenciar toda a política de contratação da empresa. Eles passaram a valorizar experiência prática tanto quanto formação acadêmica e a dar oportunidades para pessoas de diferentes idades e backgrounds. Os resultados foram surpreendentes. A empresa cresceu, a qualidade dos serviços melhorou e a satisfação tanto dos funcionários quanto dos clientes aumentou significativamente. Nossa empresa está se tornando referência no setor, disse Ricardo numa reunião geral. E muito disso se deve à visão humanizada que Doralice trouxe para nossa gestão. O sucesso profissional de Doralice não passou despercebido na mídia. Uma revista de negócios fez uma matéria sobre executivas que começaram tarde, destacando sua trajetória. Como se sente sendo um exemplo para outras mulheres? Perguntou a jornalista. Me sinto honrada, respondeu Doralice, mas também responsável. Sei que muitas mulheres estão me observando, esperando para ver se realmente é possível mudar de vida depois dos 70. E é possível? É possível, sim, disse ela com convicção. Mas não é fácil. Precisa de coragem, dedicação e, principalmente, alguém que acredite em você. Eu tive sorte de encontrar alguém que acreditou no meu potencial. A matéria repercutiu muito, e Doralice começou a receber convites para palestras e entrevistas. A princípio, ela ficou intimidada com a ideia de falar em público. Não sei se tenho preparo para isso, disse para Ricardo. Dona Dora, a senhora tem 50 anos de experiência de vida e 3 anos de sucesso empresarial. Tem muito mais preparo que a maioria dos palestrantes por aí. Mas e se eu disser alguma besteira? A senhora vai falar do coração, sobre sua experiência real. Isso é muito mais valioso que qualquer teoria de livro. A primeira palestra foi num evento sobre empreendedorismo feminino. Doralice estava nervosa, mas quando começou a contar sua história, as palavras fluíram naturalmente. Eu passei 50 anos achando que era só uma empregada, disse ela para a plateia de mais de 200 mulheres, até descobrir que era uma especialista em gestão doméstica, em recursos humanos, em resolução de conflitos, em liderança. As habilidades estavam lá. Eu só não sabia nomeá-las. A palestra foi um sucesso. Muitas mulheres se aproximaram depois para compartilhar suas próprias histórias e pedir conselhos. A senhora me inspirou, disse uma mulher de 50 anos. Trabalho como secretária há 20 anos e sempre sonhei em ter minha própria empresa. Achava que era tarde demais, mas depois de ouvir sua história, nunca é tarde demais, garantiu Doralice. O importante é dar o primeiro passo. Os convites para palestras se multiplicaram e Doralice descobriu que tinha um talento natural para inspirar pessoas. Suas apresentações sempre eram muito pessoais, humanas e tocavam o coração da audiência. Ricardo assistia a essa evolução com orgulho paternal. Você se tornou muito mais do que eu jamais imaginei, disse ele depois de uma das palestras. Eu me tornei quem sempre fui, corrigiu Doralice. Só precisava da oportunidade para mostrar. E agora você está dando essa oportunidade para outras pessoas. My children think I'm losing my mind, the woman laughed nervously. They say that at my age, I should be content with what I have. And what do you think? I think it's never too late to grow, the woman said with determination. Dorothy hired her that very same day, and she never regretted it. Within a few months, the new employee became one of the most efficient supervisors in the company. You're creating a silent revolution, Christopher remarked, hiring people that other companies wouldn't even consider. I'm giving chances that I wish I'd had earlier, Dorothy explained. Can you imagine how many competent women are stuck in jobs that don't use their potential simply because no one is willing to bet on them? Dorothy's philosophy began to influence the company's entire hiring policy. They started valuing practical experience as much as academic credentials, and giving opportunities to people of different ages and backgrounds. The results were surprising. The company grew, the quality of services improved, and satisfaction among both employees and clients increased significantly. Our company is becoming a benchmark in the industry, Christopher said at a general meeting, and much of that is due to the humanized vision Dorothy brought to our management. Dorothy's professional success did not go unnoticed by the media. A business magazine ran a feature on executives who started late, highlighting her journey. How does it feel to be a role model for other women? The journalist asked. I feel honored, Dorothy replied, but also responsible. I know many women are watching me, waiting to see if it's truly possible to change your life after 70. And is it? Yes, it is, she said with conviction. But it's not easy. It takes courage, dedication, and above all, someone who believes in you. I was lucky enough to find someone who believed in my potential. The article got a lot of attention, and Dorothy began receiving invitations for lectures and interviews. At first, the idea of public speaking intimidated her. I don't know if I'm prepared for this, she told Christopher. Mrs. Dorothy, you have 50 years of life experience and 3 years of business success. You're far more prepared than most speakers out there. But what if I say something foolish? You're going to speak from the heart, about your real experience. That's far more valuable than any theory from a book. The first lecture was at an event on women's entrepreneurship. Dorothy was nervous, but when she started telling her story, the words flowed naturally. "I spent 50 years thinking I was just a maid," she said to the audience of more than 200 women, "until I discovered I was an expert in household management, in human resources, in conflict resolution, in leadership. The skills were there. I just didn't know how to name them." The lecture was a success. Many women approached her afterward to share their own stories and ask for advice. "You've inspired me," said a 50-year-old woman. "I've worked as a secretary for 20 years and always dreamed of having my own business. I thought it was too late, but after hearing your story—" "It's never too late," Dorothy assured her. "The important thing is to take the first step." The invitations to speak multiplied, and Dorothy discovered she had a natural talent for inspiring people. Her presentations were always deeply personal, human, and touched the hearts of her audience. Christopher watched this evolution with paternal pride. "You've become far more than I ever imagined," he said after one of the lectures. "I became who I always was," Dorothy corrected him. "I just needed the opportunity to show it." "And now you're giving that opportunity to other people." "I'm trying to repay what you did for me," she said, emotional. Her schedule became busier and busier. Besides her work at the company, she began giving lectures regularly, appearing on television programs, and writing articles for trade magazines. "Isn't it too much?" asked Christopher, concerned about her frantic pace. "It's tiring," admitted Dorothy, "but it's a good kind of tired. It's the tiredness of someone who's doing something that matters. Just don't forget to take care of your health and your personal life." Dorothy smiled. "Speaking of personal life, have you met anyone interesting lately?" Christopher blushed slightly. "Actually, I've met someone." "Really?" Dorothy's eyes lit up. "Tell me everything." "She's a pediatrician who works with a community outreach project our company sponsors. She takes care of underprivileged children on the weekends. And she's special, smart, dedicated, loving with the kids." "Have you gone out with her?" Christopher hesitated. "We've gone out for coffee a few times to talk about the project." Dorothy looked at him with that maternal expression he knew so well. "Chris, you're stalling. Are you interested in her or not?" "I am," he admitted. "Very much, but I don't know if she feels the same way." "Well, find out," said Dorothy decisively. "Invite her to dinner. A real dinner, not a work conversation." "What if she says no?" "What if she says yes?" Dorothy shot back. "Sweetheart, you've spent your whole life running from relationships because you were afraid of getting hurt. But love always involves risk. That's what makes it precious." The conversation with Dorothy encouraged Christopher to make a decision. The following week, he invited the pediatrician, Dr. Catherine Whitaker, to dinner. To his surprise and delight, she accepted right away. "I thought you were never going to ask," she said, smiling. "I was starting to think you only saw me as a work partner." The dinner was the beginning of a romance that blossomed quickly. Catherine was everything Christopher had imagined: smart, caring, dedicated, and with values similar to his own. "I want her to meet you," Christopher told Dorothy after a few months of dating. "Your opinion means a lot to me." The meeting took place on a Sunday afternoon at Dorothy's house. She prepared a special lunch and received the couple with great warmth. Catherine showed genuine interest in Dorothy's story and asked insightful questions about her professional journey. "It's inspiring to see how you turned your life around," said Catherine, "and how you're helping other women do the same." "The credit isn't mine alone," said Dorothy modestly. "I had help from someone very special." She looked affectionately at Christopher. "Christopher told me how important you were in his childhood," said Catherine. "It must be so rewarding to see how he's become such a successful and generous man." "It's the greatest joy of my life," confirmed Dorothy. "And now I'm watching him find love. That completes my heart." After lunch, while Christopher and Catherine strolled through the garden, Dorothy watched from the window how happy and relaxed he seemed next to his girlfriend. "She's perfect for him," Dorothy said when they came back inside. "You two are great together." "I think so too," smiled Dorothy. "She'll take good care of my boy." "And he'll take care of her," added Christopher, taking Catherine's hand. Dorothy felt a deep emotion seeing that scene. The frightened little boy she had cared for so many years ago had finally found peace and love. A few months later, Christopher showed up at her house one afternoon with a nervous expression on his face. "I need your help," he said. "What is it? Did something happen?" "I want to ask Catherine to marry me," he said quickly, "but I don't know how to do it right. I thought you could help me." Dorothy was moved. "Of course I can. Sit down here and tell me everything." They spent hours planning the marriage proposal. Dorothy suggested it should be something intimate, meaningful, something that reflected Catherine's personality. She loves children. She works with them on the weekends. How about proposing to her during one of the community project's activities? "But wouldn't that be a little too public?" "It depends on how you do it." Dorothy smiled. "Leave it to me. I'll think of the perfect way." The idea Dorothy came up with was brilliant. She organized a special presentation by the children from the community project, where each one would recite a line about love and family. At the end, Christopher would appear with the ring. "The children will love taking part," Dorothy assured her, "and Catherine will be moved." The plan worked perfectly. Catherine was surprised and moved when she realized that the whole presentation was a marriage proposal crafted especially for her. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she said, crying and laughing at the same time. The children burst into applause and cheers of joy, and Dorothy, watching it all from afar, cried with happiness. "Thank you," Christopher said to her afterward, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for everything, for taking care of me when I was little, for teaching me how to love, for making this possible." "I'm the one who should thank you," Dorothy said, emotional, "for finding me, for changing my life, for giving me the chance to see you happy." Wedding preparations began immediately, and Dorothy was included in every detail. Catherine insisted on asking her opinion about everything: the decor, the menu, the guest list. "You're like a mother to Christopher," Catherine would say. "Your opinion is very important to us, and you're becoming like a daughter to me," Dorothy would reply, growing more and more attached to her future daughter-in-law. The wedding took place in an elegant yet warm ceremony, with family, friends, and many employees from the company Christopher had helped over the years. Dorothy was a special guest, seated in the front row next to the bridal party. Throughout the ceremony, she couldn't stop crying with emotion. "Why are you crying, Mrs. Dorothy?" asked one of the employees sitting beside her. "I'm crying with happiness," she explained. "I'm watching my boy find complete happiness." During the reception, Christopher made a point of giving a special speech thanking Dorothy. "Today I'm marrying the love of my life," he said, emotional. "But none of this would be possible without the person who taught me what unconditional love is." Mrs. Dorothy Miller was my nanny for only 2 years, but she was the mother of my heart for life. The audience rose to its feet with applause, and Dorothy had to be supported because she was trembling with emotion. "Chris," she said as he approached, "you've made me the happiest woman in the world today." "And you've made me the happiest man," he replied, kissing her forehead tenderly. The party went on until the early hours, but Dorothy left early, claiming she was tired. Actually, she wanted to let the couple enjoy the moment without worrying about her. At home alone, she sat on the porch and gazed at the stars. Her life had come full circle in an unimaginable way. At 75, she was a respected executive, a sought-after speaker, an independent and fulfilled woman. But most importantly, she had been an instrument of happiness for the boy she loved like a son. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, since we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 1 year after the wedding, Catherine showed up at Dorothy's house with special news. "Mrs. Dorothy," she said, beaming, "I'm pregnant." Dorothy dropped the coffee cup she was holding. "Is it true?" "It's true," Catherine confirmed, showing her the test. 2 months. "Christopher doesn't know yet. You're the first person I'm telling." Dorothy hugged Catherine tightly, crying with joy. "A baby. My boy is going to be a father." "And you're going to be his grandmother of the heart," said Catherine, emotional. "We would love for you to be the godmother." "Me? Godmother?" "Of course," said Catherine. "You played a part in making Christopher the man he is. We want you to be part of our child's life too." Dorothy couldn't stop crying. I don't know what to say. Say you accept," asked Catherine, smiling. "I accept," said Dorothy through tears. "I accept," with a heart full of gratitude. Catherine's pregnancy brought new joy to everyone's lives. Christopher was ecstatic at the news and began treating Dorothy with even more affection, if that was possible. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said, "I want our child to grow up knowing the most important woman in my life. And I want to teach this child everything I've learned about love and care," she replied, emotional. During the 9 months that followed, Dorothy followed every stage of the pregnancy. She helped decorate the baby's room, took part in the preparations for the child's arrival, and offered precious advice based on her experience caring for so many children throughout her life. "Do you think we'll be good parents?" Christopher asked one afternoon. "You'll be wonderful parents," Dorothy assured him. "You have love, patience, and wisdom, and you'll learn the rest day by day like all parents." "I'm afraid of making the same mistakes my parents made with me," Christopher confessed. Dorothy held his hands. "You won't make them, because you learned firsthand what it's like to be a child in need of love. That makes you more prepared, not less." When the baby was born, a beautiful girl named Abigail, Dorothy was at the hospital, as anxious as any grandmother. "She's perfect," she said when she could hold her granddaughter of the heart in her arms, "just like her father when he was little." "Less scared, I hope," laughed Christopher, watching his daughter in Dorothy's arms. "This one is going to be a brave girl," Dorothy prophesied. "She'll grow up surrounded by love and support. She'll know from a young age that she's loved and valued." Seeing Dorothy with Abigail was moving. She regained all her maternal instincts, sang the same lullabies she had sung to Christopher decades earlier, and the baby calmed down instantly in her arms. "She recognizes you," Catherine observed. "She's calmer when she's with you." "Children can tell when someone truly loves them," Dorothy explained. "And I love this girl as if she were my own granddaughter." With Abigail's arrival, everyone's life took on a new dimension. Christopher discovered fatherhood with joy and dedication. Catherine proved to be a caring and capable mother, and Dorothy became the most present and attentive grandmother one could imagine. "You don't have to come every day," Catherine would say, though without much conviction. "I know I don't have to," Dorothy would reply, "but I want to. This little girl is my joy." The company continued to grow under Christopher's leadership, but now he had found a better balance between work and personal life. Dorothy had taken on even more responsibilities, freeing him up to devote more time to his family. "You've become indispensable," he said at a board meeting. "This company wouldn't be the same without you." "None of us is indispensable," Dorothy wisely corrected. "But we're all important, and as long as I can contribute, I'll keep giving my best." Her influence at the company had created a unique organizational culture. Employees were treated like family. There was flexibility for personal matters, and growth opportunities were offered to people of different backgrounds and ages. "Our company has become a benchmark in humanized management," commented Martha, who now held the position of general director. "And it all started with your arrival." "It started with someone who believed in my potential when I didn't believe in myself," said Dorothy, looking at Christopher. Dorothy's story continued to inspire people. Her books, yes, she had written 2 books about her experience, became bestsellers. Her lectures filled auditoriums, and she had become a national reference in professional reinvention. "I still can't believe I became a writer," she said, laughing during an interview. "How do you feel being called the executive who started at 70? "I feel honored," replied Dorothy, "but I'd rather be remembered as the woman who never stopped growing. Age is just a number. What matters is the desire to learn and improve." At home, Abigail grew up surrounded by love and wisdom. At 2 years old, she already called Dorothy Grandma Dot and ran into her arms whenever she saw her. "This little girl is going to grow up thinking every child has 3 grandmothers," joked Catherine. "She's lucky to have so much love around her," said Dorothy, rocking Abigail while telling stories. "Tell the story of the scared prince, Grandma Dot," Abigail would ask in her sweet little voice. That was how Dorothy told Christopher's story to his daughter, like a little prince who was afraid, but who found a fairy godmother who taught him to be brave and who grew up to become a kind king who helped many people. "Does the fairy godmother still live in the kingdom?" Abigail would always ask. "Yes, she does," Dorothy would reply, smiling. "And she always will, because the prince will never let her go." Christopher, listening to these conversations, was always moved. His daughter was growing up knowing the story of love and gratitude that united him and Dorothy, and it was part of what shaped her as a person. At 78 years old, Dorothy remained professionally active, but she had slowed down a bit. She delegated more responsibilities to her team and focused on the activities she loved most, mentoring young professionals and spending time with Abigail. "Have you thought about retiring?" Christopher asked one afternoon. "Sometimes I do," admitted Dorothy. "But I don't know if I could stay idle. Work gives me purpose." "What if you kept working but with fewer responsibilities? As a consultant, for example?" The idea appealed to Dorothy. She could continue contributing without the pressure of the executive daily grind, and she'd have more time to devote to what really mattered. "It would be perfect," she agreed. "I can help train new supervisors, give occasional lectures, take part in special projects, and have more time for your granddaughter," added Christopher, smiling. The transition was smooth and natural. Dorothy passed on her knowledge to a competent successor she herself had trained, another middle-aged woman with hands-on experience and a drive to grow. "The tradition continues," remarked Martha during the transition ceremony. "That's how it should be," said Dorothy. "Each of us paves the way for those who come after." With more free time, Dorothy devoted herself wholeheartedly to her granddaughter. Abigail, now 4 years old, was a smart, affectionate, and endlessly curious little girl. "Why do you and Daddy love each other so much, Grandma Dot?" Abigail asked one day. Dorothy thought carefully about her answer. "Because sometimes in life, we meet people who are special to us. Your daddy was special to me when he was tiny like you, and I was special to him too. And now I'm special to you both. You're the most special thing in the whole world," said Dorothy, kissing the little girl's forehead. Abigail grew up hearing these stories of love, care, and gratitude. She learned early on that family isn't just those who share the same blood, but those who love and take care of one another. "Grandma Dot," Abigail said one afternoon, "when I grow up, can I take care of you?" Dorothy felt her heart swell with emotion. "Of course you can, my love. It would be an honor to be taken care of by you." "And can I work at Daddy's company too?" "If you want to, you can," said Dorothy. "But only if you really enjoy it. What matters is doing what makes you happy." "What makes you happy, Grandma Dot?" Dorothy looked around. The comfortable house she had bought, the books she had written on the shelf, the photos of her and Christopher at various stages of life, the beautiful little granddaughter playing in her lap. "You all make me happy," she said simply. "Knowing that I helped your daddy become the wonderful man he is, seeing him happy with your mommy, and now having you to love, that's all I could ever want in life." "And helping other people makes you happy too?" "It does," smiled Dorothy. "When we help others, our heart feels warm inside." "Then I want to help people too when I grow up," decided Abigail. "I'm sure you will," said Dorothy, hugging her granddaughter. "You already help just by existing and spreading joy wherever you go." As the years went by, the bond between Christopher, Catherine, Abigail, and Dorothy only grew stronger. They had become a family in the deepest sense of the word, united not only by biological ties, but by genuine love and mutual gratitude. Christopher never failed to credit his personal and professional success to Dorothy. In every interview he gave, at every award he received, he mentioned the woman who had changed his life when he was just a frightened child. "She taught me that every human being has value," he would say, "and that our responsibility is to help one another discover that value." Catherine, for her part, treated Dorothy as the mother-in-law she had chosen to have. She included her in every important decision, asked her advice on motherhood and life in general, and always said that Abigail was lucky to have such a wise grandmother. "You've taught me so much about unconditional love," said Catherine in one conversation. "Seeing how you love Christopher, I understand better how to love my own family." Dorothy continued giving occasional lectures and writing articles. But now her main focus was truly the family she had chosen, and that had chosen her back. In her speeches, she always emphasized that it's never too late to start over, but that what mattered most wasn't the age at which you began a new phase, but rather the relationships you built along the way. Professional success is rewarding, she would say, but love is what gives life meaning. And true love has no age to begin and no expiration date. When Abigail turned 6, she made a special request for her birthday party. She wanted everyone who worked at the company to be invited. "They're all our friends," she explained to her parents. "And Grandma Dot says friends are family too." The party took place in the garden of Christopher and Catherine's house, with over 100 guests. Among employees, clients, friends from church and family, there were people of all ages and social backgrounds. Dorothy watched that celebration with deep satisfaction. There were dozens of people whose lives had been positively touched by the company Christopher had built, by the humanized philosophy she had helped implement. "Grandma Dot," said Abigail, tugging at her skirt. "Are you crying?" "I'm crying from happiness," explained Dorothy. "When I see all these people together, celebrating love, I remember how beautiful life can be. And do you remember when Daddy was little like me?" "I do," smiled Dorothy. "He was a sad boy who needed lots of affection, just like you're a joyful girl who spreads affection to everyone. And you took care of him until he grew up big?" "I did. And I'll keep taking care of him forever the way I take care of you." Abigail hugged Dorothy tightly. "I love you, Grandma Dot. You're the best grandma in the whole world." "And you are the best granddaughter in the whole world," replied Dorothy, her heart overflowing with love. That night, after all the guests had left and Abigail had gone to sleep, Christopher, Catherine, and Dorothy sat on the porch to talk. "Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy," Christopher said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For taking care of me when I was a child, for agreeing to work with me, for helping build our company, for being part of our family, for loving Abigail like a real grandmother. For everything." "I'm the one who should be thanking you," Dorothy said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a second chance at life. You gave me purpose, fulfillment, a family to love. You gave me far more than I ever dreamed of having." "We gave each other exactly what we needed," Catherine observed. "Christopher needed a mother and you needed a son. Christopher needed someone to help with the company and you needed a chance to grow. Abigail needed a special grandmother and you needed a granddaughter to spoil." "That's true," Christopher agreed. "It seems like our story was written from the very beginning." "It wasn't written," Dorothy corrected wisely. "It was built day after day with love, dedication, and gratitude. And it will continue to be built as long as we're together." They fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. "You know what makes me happiest?" Dorothy said finally. "What?" Christopher and Catherine asked together. "It's knowing that our story will live on through Abigail. She's growing up knowing true love, the importance of family, the value of helping others. She'll carry that into her own life and pass it on to her children." "What a beautiful legacy," Catherine said, deeply moved. "It's the best legacy we can leave," Christopher agreed, "to teach by example that love always wins." When Dorothy turned 80, the family organized a surprise party that became a milestone in their lives. It wasn't just a birthday celebration, but a recognition of everything she had accomplished and all the lives she had touched. Present were employees from every era of the company, women who had been inspired by her talks, co-workers who had learned from her wisdom, and of course the family of the heart she had helped build. "This party isn't just to celebrate your 80th birthday," Christopher said in his speech. "It's to celebrate 80 years of a life dedicated to caring for others. A life that proves it's never too late to start over, never too late to grow, and never too late to find your true family." Abigail, now 8 years old, had prepared a special presentation for Granny Dot. She recited a poem she had written all by herself about the love story between a fairy godmother and a little prince who grew up to be a kind king. "And they lived happily ever after," Abigail concluded, "because true love never ends." Dorothy wept copiously throughout the entire presentation, Seeing that precious little girl telling her story with so much affection and understanding was the most moving gift she could have received. "Abigail," she said when her granddaughter finished, "you understood our story better than many adults. That just shows how special you are." "I learned it from you, Granny Dot," Abigail replied. "You always say that love is the most important thing in the world." "And it is," Dorothy confirmed, hugging her granddaughter. "And you are living proof that love always gives us wonderful gifts." The party lasted until late in the night, with music, dancing, and many stories being shared. People from different periods of Dorothy's life met one another and shared experiences about how she had influenced their paths. "It's remarkable to see how many lives you've touched," one of the former employees commented, "and they all have similar stories about how you encourage them to believe in themselves." "I just did what I wished someone had done for me," replied Dorothy, "believing in people and giving them opportunities to shine." In the years that followed, Dorothy lived the fullness of a fulfilled life. Her health remained good for her age, her mind stayed sharp, and her zest for life was contagious. Abigail was growing into a confident, caring girl who was aware of her role in the world. At 10, she already talked about wanting to help people like Grandma Dot does. "She's going to grow up to be an incredible woman," said Catherine, watching her daughter play with Dorothy. "She's already incredible," corrected Christopher, "and she has the best examples of strong women she could have. You and Mrs. Dorothy." The company continued to prosper under Christopher's leadership, but now with a more distributed and mature management team. The humanized philosophy implemented by Dorothy had become the company's hallmark, attracting both talented employees and clients who valued socially responsible companies. "Our company has become much more than a business," Christopher reflected during a strategic planning meeting. "It has become an example of how to treat people with dignity and respect." "And that didn't happen by chance," recalled Martha. "It was the result of clear values and consistent actions." Dorothy, as a special consultant, still occasionally participated in these meetings, always bringing the human perspective to business decisions. "What do you think about creating a mentoring program for women over 50 who want to change careers?" she suggested during one of these meetings. The idea was immediately embraced by the team and became one of the company's most successful social projects. Hundreds of women benefited from the program, receiving not only professional training, but also emotional support to face the challenges of starting over at a more mature age. "You created a movement," said one of the program's participants. "It's not just about employment, it's about dignity, about discovering that our experience has value." "It's about never giving up on yourself," replied Dorothy. "No matter the age, we can always grow and contribute." At home, the family routine had settled harmoniously. Abigail spent part of her afternoons with Dorothy, doing homework, listening to stories, and learning about important values. "Grandma Dot," Abigail asked during one of these moments, "do you think I'll be as important as you when I grow up?" Dorothy stopped knitting and looked seriously at her granddaughter. "Abigail, you are already important. You don't need to wait to grow up." "What do you mean?" "You are important to me, to your father, to your mother. You brighten our lives every day. Isn't that being important?" Abigail thought for a moment. "It is, but I want to be important to other people too." "And you will be," Dorothy assured, "because you have a good heart and want to help. That's all you need to be important in other people's lives. Do you think I can work at Daddy's company when I grow up? If you want to, you can. But you could also be a doctor, a teacher, an artist, anything that makes you happy. The important thing is not where you work, but how you treat people. So if I become a doctor, I can treat people with kindness the way you do." "You can and you should," Dorothy smiled. "Kindness is medicine for any profession." These everyday conversations were precious to Dorothy. She knew she was planting seeds that would bloom in Abigail's personality for a lifetime. At 83, Dorothy decided to write her third book, this time focused specifically on her relationship with Christopher and Abigail. It would be a work about chosen family, about how love can be born and grow beyond blood ties. "Quero deixar registrada nossa história completa", explicou ela para Christopher, "para que Abigail e os filhos dela saibam exatamente como chegamos até aqui. É uma linda ideia, concordou Catherine, e vai inspirar outras famílias que se formaram de maneiras não convencionais. The writing process was emotional and therapeutic. Dorothy relived every important moment of the journey that had brought them there, from the first meeting at the office to the afternoons playing with Abigail. É impressionante como nossa vida parece livro, commented Christopher, reading the first chapters. Tem começo, meio e fim perfeitos. Não tem fim ainda, corrected Dorothy. Nossa história continua acontecendo todos os dias. The book was released to great success, quickly becoming a national bestseller. The true story of family love touched millions of hearts and inspired other people to cherish the special connections in their own lives. Vocês se tornaram símbolo de esperança, said the publisher at the launch event. Mostram que família é sobre escolha, não sobre obrigação. The interviews and talks that followed the book took Dorothy, Christopher, and Abigail's story all over the country. They became living proof of how relationships built on gratitude and true love can transform lives. O que vocês diriam para pessoas que perderam a esperança de encontrar sua verdadeira família? Asked a journalist during a press conference. Que nunca é tarde, answered Dorothy. E que família de verdade pode aparecer de formas que nunca imaginamos. O importante é estar aberto para reconhecer e nutrir esses relacionamentos especiais quando eles aparecem. E que o amor sempre encontra jeito, added Christopher. Às vezes demora, mas sempre encontra. Abigail, now 12 years old and already showing impressive emotional maturity, also took part in a few interviews. Como é crescer numa família que se formou de jeito diferente? They asked her. É normal para mim, answered Abigail naturally. Sempre soube que vovó Dot não é minha avó de sangue, mas ela é minha avó de coração. E isso é ainda mais especial, porque ela me escolheu para amar. Abigail's precocious wisdom always surprised the adults. She had grown up surrounded by examples of mature, conscious love, which made her understand relationships in a way that was remarkably balanced for her age. Esta menina vai mudar o mundo, Dorothy would say proudly. Ela aprendeu desde pequena que o amor é uma escolha diária, não sentimento que simplesmente acontece. When Abigail turned 15, she made a request that moved the whole family. She wanted to organize a special dinner for just the four of them, Christopher, Catherine, Dorothy, and herself, to celebrate our family of the heart. Por que esse pedido, minha filha? Asked Catherine, curious. Porque quero que todos saibam como sou grata por ter vocês, answered Abigail simply. As pessoas sempre perguntam sobre nossa família ser diferente, e eu quero que vocês saibam que para mim é perfeita. The dinner took place at Dorothy's house, who insisted on personally cooking all of her granddaughter's favorite dishes. It was an intimate and moving evening where each one was able to express their gratitude for the others. Vovó Dot, said Abigail during dinner, você sabe que mudou nossa família inteira, né? Como assim, querida? Se você não tivesse cuidado do papai quando ele era pequeno, ele teria crescido diferente. Se ele tivesse crescido diferente, talvez não conhecesse a mamãe. Se não conhecesse a mamãe, eu não teria nascido. E se você não fosse a pessoa especial que é, nós não seríamos a família unida que somos. Dorothy was speechless at the teenager's insight. É verdade, agreed Christopher, moved. Tudo que temos de bom na vida começou com o amor que Mrs. Dorothy me deu quando eu era criança. And it continues with the love she gives us every day, added Catherine. You are my greatest joy, said Dorothy, her voice choking up. If I died tomorrow, I would die knowing my life had purpose. Don't say that, protested Abigail. You still have many years ahead of you, and many things to teach me. And many grandchildren to meet, joked Christopher. Abigail will get married one day and have children, and you'll be a great-grandmother. I hope I'm here to meet the great-grandchildren, smiled Dorothy. And I hope they have the same kindness as Abigail. They will, assured Abigail, because I'll teach them everything you taught me. The conversation went on until late, with each one sharing special memories and plans for the future. It was a family that had chosen to love one another, and that choice made their bonds even stronger than biological ones. When Dorothy turned 85, her health was still surprisingly good. She kept a sharp mind, a good sense of humor, and the energy to enjoy every moment with her family. Abigail, now a 17-year-old young woman, decided to study psychology in college in order to help people who've been through trauma like my father went through. "I'm proud of your choice," said Dorothy when she heard the news. "You're going to be an extraordinary psychologist." "I learned by watching you," replied Abigail. "I saw how you always knew the right words for each person, how you understood what people needed. I want to learn to do that in a more technical way." Abigail's career choice closed a beautiful circle in the family story. The girl who had grown up watching Love Heal Trauma wanted to dedicate herself professionally to healing trauma with love. "Our story is truly inspiring," commented Christopher. "A nanny saves a child, the child grows up and saves the nanny, and now the granddaughter wants to save other people. That's how goodness spreads through the world," philosophized Dorothy. "One good deed leads to another, which leads to another, and it creates a chain of kindness." On the eve of Abigail's college entrance exam, Dorothy made a point of having a special conversation with her granddaughter. "No matter the result," she said, "I want you to know that you're already a source of great pride for all of us." "I'm nervous," admitted Abigail. "What if I don't get in?" "Then you try again next year," replied Dorothy matter-of-factly. "What matters isn't how fast you achieve something, it's persistence. Look at me. I got my first important job at 70. Everyone has their own timing. Do you think I'll be able to help people the way you did?" "I think you'll help in an even better way," assured Dorothy, "because you'll have technical knowledge I never had, but you'll also have emotional wisdom that many professionals don't have." Abigail passed the entrance exam with the highest score. The celebration was lively, with the whole family gathering to mark yet another achievement. "Congratulations, my psychologist," said Dorothy, hugging her emotional granddaughter. "I'm not a psychologist yet," laughed Abigail. "I need to study for 5 years." "To me, you already are," said Dorothy, "because you already have the most important thing, the desire to take care of people." Throughout Abigail's college years, Dorothy followed every stage with interest and pride. Their conversations became even more interesting, with Abigail bringing academic knowledge and Dorothy contributing practical wisdom. "I'm learning about child development," Abigail would say, "and it's amazing how you always knew instinctively what was best for children." "Mothers know those things in their hearts," Dorothy would reply. "And I was a mother to many children throughout my life." The professor talked about trauma and resilience, and I remembered Dad's story. "How did you know he was going to recover?" "I didn't know," admitted Dorothy. "But I believed. Sometimes believing is enough to help someone heal." These conversations between grandmother and granddaughter became precious to both. Abigail learned the theory in college and understood the practice through Dorothy's experiences. When Abigail was in her 3rd year of college, Dorothy received a special invitation. A university wanted to bestow upon her the title of Doctor Honoris Causa for her contribution to the development of humanized business management practices. "Me? A doctor?" she said in disbelief. "Why not?" said Christopher. "You revolutionized the way we treat employees in our company, inspired dozens of other companies to adopt similar practices, wrote 3 books that are references in the field, and trained hundreds of professionals. If that doesn't deserve a doctorate, what does?" The award ceremony was moving. Dorothy, at 88 years old, walked onto the stage wearing the university's gown and cap before an audience that included business people, academics, and her entire family. "I never imagined I'd reach 88 years old being called a doctor," she said in her thank you speech. "This proves that we should never put limits on our dreams, and that life experience, when properly valued, can be worth as much as any academic title." Abigail cried with pride in the audience. "Now we have 2 doctors in the family," she told her parents. "She's honorary. I'm in training." "And both equally important," added Catherine. With her doctorate, Dorothy began receiving even more invitations for lectures and consulting. Her story had become a case study in business schools across the country. "You've become a case study," joked Christopher. "Students learn about the Dorothy Miller case as an example of successful humanized management." "Imagine that, right?" laughed Dorothy. "Who would have thought an old cleaning lady would become an academic example?" "A successful executive," corrected Christopher. who started as a cleaning lady but became so much more. Abigail graduated in psychology with honors and decided to specialize in family therapy. "I want to work with families that are formed in different ways," she explained, "to show that love is more important than biology." "Perfect choice," Dorothy approved. "You're going to help so many families understand each other better." On the day of Abigail's graduation, Dorothy sat in the front row beaming with pride. Seeing her granddaughter of the heart officially become a professional dedicated to caring for people was the fulfillment of a dream she didn't even know she had. "Dr. Abigail Miller Harrison," announced the dean when her turn came. "Dr. Abigail," repeated Dorothy, emotional. "My little granddaughter, a doctor." After the ceremony, Abigail approached Dorothy with her diploma in hand. "This diploma is yours too, Grandma Dot," she said. "You taught me everything I know about caring for people. The professors taught me the theory, but you taught me the essence." "The diploma is yours," said Dorothy, moved. "You studied, you dedicated yourself, you earned it. I only gave love, which is what any grandmother would do." "Love is the most important thing in caring for people," said Abigail. "And in that, you're a PhD." The conversation between the two was interrupted when Christopher and Catherine approached to congratulate their daughter. "We're so proud," said Catherine, hugging Abigail. "And eager to see what kind of psychologist you'll become," added Christopher. "I'm going to be a psychologist who learned from the best family therapist in the world," said Abigail, looking at Dorothy. "Even without a diploma." Abigail opened her practice 2 years later, specializing in family therapy and late adoption. Her first client was a middle-aged couple who wanted to adopt older children but was unsure about how to build bonds. "Let me tell you a story," said Abigail in the first session, "about how my family was formed through love, not blood." Abigail's professional success was quick and well-deserved. Her unique approach, combining technical knowledge with emotional wisdom learned at home, attracted clients of all ages and backgrounds. Dorothy watched this growth with maternal satisfaction. "She's exceeded all our expectations," she remarked to Christopher. "Just as you exceeded mine," he replied. "Our family is proof that love always finds a way to multiply." When Abigail turned 25, she brought a surprise for the family. She had met someone special. "His name is Thomas. He's a pediatrician. He works with underprivileged children," she said shyly, "and I'd really love for you all to meet him." "Of course we want to meet him," said Catherine enthusiastically. "When can we set up a dinner?" "Actually," said Abigail, smiling, "he's in the car. He was too nervous to come in alone." Thomas proved to be a kind, intelligent young man, clearly in love with Abigail. During dinner, he made a point of listening to the family's stories and showed great respect for the special bond between Abigail and Dorothy. "Abigail always talks about you," Thomas said to Dorothy, "about how you were fundamental in shaping this whole family." "And she always talks about your children at the hospital," Dorothy replied. "It's beautiful to see young people dedicated to caring for those in need." "We learned that from examples like yours," Thomas said humbly. The relationship evolved naturally, and 2 years later, Thomas proposed to Abigail. The ceremony was even more emotional than Christopher and Catherine's, because now they had Dorothy as the bride's grandmother and an even richer family story to celebrate. "Today my granddaughter is getting married," Dorothy said in her speech at the reception, "and I feel like the most blessed woman in the world. Seeing this girl, who grew up knowing what true love is, find her life partner, is the complete fulfillment of my dreams." Abigail cried through the entire speech. "Grandma Dot," she said afterward, "everything good I have in my life started with you. The love I learned at home prepared me to find and recognize true love." "And it will prepare you to be a wonderful wife and mother," Dorothy replied. "The circle will continue." 2 years after the wedding, Abigail became pregnant. The news was met with euphoria by the whole family, especially Dorothy, now 92 years old, but still sharp and active. "I'm going to be a great-grandmother," she said, emotional. "I never thought I'd live to see a great-grandchild." "And you're going to be the best great-grandmother in the world," Abigail assured her. "This child is going to grow up hearing your stories and learning your lessons." During the pregnancy, Dorothy helped prepare the layette, gave advice on motherhood, and shared stories about how she had cared for dozens of babies throughout her life. Every child is unique, she would tell Abigail, but they all need the same basic things: love, patience, and attention. How did you manage to care for so many children without ever growing tired of love? Because love doesn't tire, Dorothy answered wisely. Love renews itself with every child, every smile, every small achievement. The more love you give, the more love you have to give. The baby was born on a spring afternoon, a beautiful, healthy boy named Chris, in honor of his grandfather and great-grandfather of the heart. It's the circle closing, said Christopher, moved as he watched his son holding his grandson. It's the circle opening, Dorothy corrected, holding her great-grandson in her arms. Each generation opens new possibilities for love. Chris grew up surrounded by the love of 4 generations. He had young, devoted parents, loving grandparents, and the wise great-grandmother who told the best stories in the world. Bis, Bis, as he called her when he started to talk. Tell the story of the little prince. And Dorothy told once again the story of how a frightened boy found a fairy godmother who taught him to be brave, and how that prince grew up to be a kind king who built a kingdom of love. And does the fairy godmother still live in the kingdom? Chris asked, just as Abigail had asked decades before. She does, Dorothy replied, now 95 years old, but with the same sparkle in her eyes, and she will live there forever, because true love never ends. The end. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're listening from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe that love can truly transform lives the way it did for Dorothy and Christopher? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.